Yeah, I think a fascinating point to interject here is if you go back to Peter David Beater's testimony and you look at his history of the Rockefellers, what you realize is that their world power and how it manifested simply came from the economic advantage that they held as the kingpins of the oil economy. And I think that when the Rothschilds set them up, they underestimated how dominant that economic force would be, that this group would end up splintering off and becoming such a megalithic force throughout most of the 20th century.
Well, yeah, there you have it. You have the Rothschilds pushing this global warming, which was really an effort to promote the nuclear industry and make it seem environmentally friendly again.
Right.
They battle against the oil and the war industry in the U.S. So you had two big factions there fighting. That was manifested in the election that Al Gore had stolen from him. Although it turns out he's also a scumbag, no. But the thing they have in common is they want to have a central control over the energy. They want to charge everybody a monthly bill.
When you say they have in common, you mean the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers?
The different factions all want centralized control of the economy. In other words, they all want to have a Babylonian God King type system, secret ruler with godlike powers and everything under central control. And what's the difference is who is that person in central control. That's what the fighting has been about. And I think what most of humanity says is we're tired of having secret god kings ruling us, and we want this system to end. So that's the other real battle. And I personally believe in meritocracy as the best form of government. That is a pyramid that anybody can climb to the top if they're good enough, with complete transparency.
Well, I think the gist of what you're also saying here, just to reiterate this point, is that the other countries of whom you've mentioned there are a variety of factions have now eclipsed the economic power and growth of either the Rothschild or the Rockefeller factions.
That's right. And they were afraid that they're going to lose control. That's why they wanted to kill everybody. But the Asians and the Asian secret society have been fighting them for hundreds of years and doing business with them at the same time, I might add. So, for example, some of the people I talked to, sold the heroin to the CIA during the Vietnam War.
Right.
And when the CIA tried to double-cross them, they blew up a bunch of CIA airplanes, and then they went back to business.
Mm.
So they've been dealing with them since the times of the Opium Wars, or before, but they have not been controlled by them. And they've been trying very hard through bribery and promising, to China that you'll get to rule the entire planet. Just work with us. They've managed to, corrupt a lot of people out here, but not enough to make a difference at the end of the day. And we've been weeding out the people they bribed, and we've identified them. So, the process is ongoing. We're in a war, and it's not over.
Right, and I would say that the major tools that they seem to have on their side would be blackmail, bribery, death threats, intimidation, and all those things cost money, right?
And propaganda. Yeah, they cost money, yeah.
Yeah, and the point being that they're basically no longer able to finance the scope of intimidation, blackmail, and bribery operations required to keep a lid on this thing.
That's right, and, now the mafia has broken away, and, the Chinese underground has broken away, and then the Japanese underground has broken away. So, you see, at the very top of the world, if you want to get that high in power, you have to have armies, spies, assassins. It's not normal thinking anymore. This is how these people have operated, and they've had these secret organizations all over the world. And what's happened is that they're losing control over. They've lost control over the secret organizations in Asia, and there's a huge battle in the West between what I would say are the good guys who want to restore actual democracy and freedom of the press and everything, and the ones who are still trying to create a or maintain the secret dictatorship that they've had, this, Babylonian God King system. And then within that, there's different factions. But I would have to say also that even if you cannot predict the details of the ongoing intrigues, because it's so complex and Machiavellian, you can say that at the end of the day, they're doomed. It's like if you light a cigarette, you cannot predict the individual swirls of cigarette smoke and how they're going to go. But you can predict that over a certain amount of time, the smoke will be evenly divided throughout the room. And the fact is they've lost control over the world's financial system, and that means that it is just a matter of time before their control of Western society is going to end.
Now, when Christopher Story talks about dollar refinancing operations, you have mentioned something to the effect that the people who actually have legitimate money in the bank and aren't playing these collateralized debt obligation games and derivatives games and so forth, that their money will be preserved as we go through this transitional process. Is that correct?
Well, okay, my own independent information is that, and it coincides a lot with Mr. Story, but not completely, was that they, first of all, under the President Clinton and Greenspan, they secretly passed a law allowing 100 times leverage. That is, you could bet 100 times what you really had.
This is the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act or something else?
Well, it's that the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act is part of it, but the point is that usually there's a limit. Like there was always a traditional limit of 10%.
Okay.
So you could, that is to say, for example, if you bought $100,000 future contract, you'd have to have 10,000 real dollars.
Correct.
But now they made it so if you wanted to buy it, you only had to have 1,000 real dollars to buy 100,000, and that makes it a much more high risk, high return. And what they did was for example, in California, there was an illegal Mexican worker earning $12,000 a year, and they gave him a loan to buy a house worth $750,000, and he didn't have to pay any money for the first 5 years. Now, of course, they know that loan's going to go bad, but it doesn't matter because that was part of the plan. They then take that $750,000 house as collateral, put it in some kind of mortgage-backed fund, and then bet it 100 times more. So it would be suddenly $75 million, I believe. And when the price of real estate is going up, you get these astronomical profits, which they then park in the Cayman Islands and off the banking's official books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when the price of real estate started falling, they created these astronomical losses, which they also just hid. And their plan was to bankrupt the U.S. and then come back and buy everything on the cheap. But what happened was the rest of the banking world said, enough of this crime and theft, and they tried to sterilize this money, saying, no, you cannot cash that money. That was created through fraud. And this is where the battle lines are drawn. Now the Bush and all these people, the feds, they want to cash that stuff in at 2.5% of what it's worth. But under Obama, they've reflated this bubble, and they've now got literally something like $4 quintillion. I had to look this up, It's like a one with 30 zeros or something. It's just totally nonsense because the entire world GDP is 60 trillion. Okay, so it's like, I'll offer you $1 zillion, please give me your sunglasses. You say, what? This is the sort of nonsense it's degenerated into.
Right.
But it's about power. And these guys still control a vast military apparatus, and they're threatening violence if we don't come to a deal. So,
these guys meaning the Rockefeller faction.
Yeah, that whole group, the owners of the Federal Reserve Board. And then the owners of all the propaganda media company.
Well, it's my understanding from what Christopher Story is saying that Obama's executive order has now allowed Interpol to be holding people at gunpoint on both ends of these Federal Reserve transactions that are necessary to execute the lien that was put on them from China to the effect of some, 40